with me this morning is Bill Kuhlman, who's a retired principal at Somerset Schools. Today's date is March the 6th, 1998. Sunshine coming in here in the kitchen this morning, just a beautiful day. I can see some snow outside yet on the yard, so nice to be in your house here, Mr. Gary, and let's talk about coal mining today. And before we get into that, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and your family and bring us up to date on that.
Okay, I was born into a family of 12 children, 7 boys and 5 girls. And I had 2 of the most wonderful parents. Good Christian dad, a good Christian mom, both of them. Wouldn't be for them, I don't know where I'd be today.
And what were their names?
My father's name was Jacob Gary, and my mother's name was Minnie Gary. And my father was 83 years old when he passed away. He passed away on my birthday. That had been February the 27th, 1969. Mother, she passed away April the 13th, 1985. And, I'm looking forward to see them someday. I'd like to just say what they said before the last words I spoke with my father and also my mother. I went to visit my father shortly before he passed away. He was sitting in the corner of our old farmhouse, an old coal stove. He took care of this old coal stove. He could hardly walk anymore. He walked with a cane. When I was ready to leave, I visited with him. He come to the door, he laid his hand on my shoulder. He looked at me, he said, "Frank," he said, "I'm glad you're a Christian." Well, I am too. He said, "I'd like to pray with you before you leave." So he laid his hand on my shoulder and he started to pray. And I know when he prayed, he touched the throne room of God. Because here's what he said when he was praying. I could feel the presence of the Lord, or the Spirit going through me. And when he was done praying, he looked at me, he said, "Now, if I'm not here, when you come home again, I'll meet you over there." One of these days, I'm going to meet him over there. I know it.
Right.
So, and also, then I would like to say a few words about my mother.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Her name was Miner. Minnie Miner.
M-I-N-E-R?
M-I-N-E-R, yes. That was her maiden name. But anyhow, she was out in the Seaman nursing home. We didn't like to have her go there, but it was impossible for us to care for her. She needed professional help. She fell and broke her shoulder, and quite a few things was wrong with her. But anyhow, she was only out there, I think, about a week. She was willing to go. She knew we couldn't handle the situation there. But anyhow, I was going to say, we had prayer with her. I went over to her bed. I laid my head down on the bed beside her and prayed. She hears some things. She says, "Oh, I wish Jesus would come and take me home." She said, "I'd like to see Pat." But she said, "I guess my mansion isn't quite ready." Now that is the faith that woman had. But she said, "He's coming." And so whenever she left, when I was ready to leave, she said to me, when she mentioned about the Lord coming, I says, "Oh, he may come and get me before he does you, Mom." She says, "I tell you," she said, "if he takes you home first, you watch for me." She said, "If I go home first, I'll be watching for you." So those are her last words that I spoke. That was on a Saturday night. Wednesday, around noontime or a little before, I got a call from the hospital. "Your mother has been admitted in. She collapsed out in the dining room." So I hurried into the hospital to sign her in, and fix the necessary papers. And I went up to her room. Her eyes were open. She couldn't speak. I couldn't talk to her no more. So we called the doctor in and he examined her. He said to me, "You better call your family." He said, "She's in the hands of the Lord." she's in his hands now. I can't do no more. Dr. Laquando was a doctor. So this went on for a couple days. We was with her. We stayed with her. The kids all came. It was the ones that were living. Most of them were living then. Maybe one had passed away. But anyhow, Saturday forenoon, I don't know just exactly what time it was. I wasn't there when she passed away. But Saturday afternoon, she went home to her mansion, and which she was waiting for. So that's about my dad and mother.
Okay. How about your brothers and sisters? You have a large family. Could you name all of them for us? So
Yes, yes. My oldest brother's name was Harry Gary. He was the oldest. If he was living, he'd be about 88 if he was living. He's dead, passed away sometime a few years ago. Then my second brother's name was Charles. He was the one that passed away first, Charles Gary. So he was only in his 60s when he left this life. Good Christian, though. They were all ready to meet the Lord. That's what makes me feel so good. But then Norman, he's the oldest that's living. And then there was one next to him. It was Lester. He died it'll be 12 years ago. He died right before his birthday. So then I come next.
And what year were you born?
I was born in 1918.
Okay.
And there's two of us boys. There's Norman, he is the oldest, and I am that's next to the oldest that's living. And then the youngest boy is named Paul. He is the youngest of the boys in the family. Now, the girls, Rosie she has passed away about 13 years ago. She was next to me in age. She was married to a Trimpe, Rosie Gary Trimpe. She was such a nice person. And then comes Lily. She is next to Rosie. She's living. She is married to Homer Brock down in Castleman. I don't know, maybe you know him.
No, I don't.
But that's who she's married to. And then there was Gladys. She passed away. She was married to Harold Krieger. She passed away about 3 years ago. So she is no longer here. Then come next, my brother John. I didn't mention him. He died about 3 years ago. And then comes Katie. I believe Katie was next. Excuse me, I think Katie was older than John. I'm not sure. But anyway, she died suddenly. She died in bed. And we went to look in the bed. There she was, sitting up in the bed, home with the Lord. So then it was John. I believe that's the way it is. I'm sorry. But then was Edna, my sister Edna. She's still living. Got a Christmas card from her.
Good.
She remembers me. So then comes Paul, as I mentioned, which is the youngest. He is living. So there's 3 of us boys and 2 girls left out of the 12 kids in the family. And of course, Dad and Mom's gone too.
Okay.
And,
Well, it's a large family, and certainly at that time, I guess that wasn't unusual. Where was your home place?
I was born, you mean where I was born? I was born near Scalton. We moved away from Scalton and moved to Kingwood, out at Kingwood, just a mile below Kingwood. We moved down on a little farm, and we was there till I left home, I guess, when I was around 18, to not be home no more, or regular. I was working around in the mines and so forth there before. But I was there, we were there till I left home, Kingwood.
One last question, I guess, on your family before we get to talking more about mining. Do you know anything about your grandparents, their names?
Yes, I remember both sides. My grandfather's name was John Gary. He lived out close to Scalton, right above my home place where I was born. And I knew my grandma. She died. I was quite small when my grandma, her name was Catherine Gary, and his name was, I believe I did say John. John Gary.
Do you remember Catherine's maiden name?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But then that is on my father's side. Now on my mother's side, he was an old Civil War veteran, old Ephraim Minor. He was a Civil War veteran. And he married his wife, or my grandma, was 20 years younger than he. Her name was Rosetta Harbaugh. So that's how that age difference there.
Did your grandfather
Ephraim?
Did he live long enough that you ever heard any Civil War stories or anything about the Civil War?
Yes, I did. I remember him not a whole lot. I was a few years old when he passed away. But I remember him one incident when he came to visit with us, and we went up to my other grandfather's house, and he took me by the hand, and he led me along. So I was only a few years old, but I remember that as good as it was yesterday. But I know exactly how Grandpap looked. He had a beard, a little white chin beard. His beard was white. But I remember him. And Grandpap, on my other side, he had a bigger beard. It was a wider beard. But they both had beards.
Yeah, and just to push a little further on that, do you know anything about your family beyond your grandparents?
I knew a little bit about my great-grandma. That's all, Grandma Harbaugh.
Okay.
That's all I can remember of her. I remember of seeing her. But that is all. Now, that was on my mother's side.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember anything about on my father's side.
Okay. Just, I guess, another question. In your family, did they ever talk about when they came to the United States? Was there any conversation of that you recall about when they might have moved to this country?
Yes. There was one thing, there was one that I do remember about my great-grandmother on my father's side. It comes to my mind. She came from Germany. And I remember that she brought a huge chest home with her from Germany over. And then you ought to saw the key to unlock that chest. It was a great big key like that. But she came from Germany. And then I'd like to say one thing yet about my father. When he started to school, he couldn't talk English. He was a Dutchman. He talked Pennsylvania Dutch. The teachers had quite a few problems, I imagine, with that.
I would think so.
But anyhow, when we would go to grandfather's house, grandma's, that's all they would talk. It was very difficult for me. I didn't know what they were talking about. I thought, well, they could be talking about me. I don't know. But that's the way the home was. But a very close family.
The chest that you mentioned, is that still in the family? Or?
Yes, that chest, my dad, he said, when I pass away, he said, I want Elwood, that's my brother's boy, to have that chest. Because this boy was named after my father. His name was Jacob, too. So he got the chest, and he lives on the old home place. He has it.
That's a valuable thing to keep within your family. And,
that's right.
Yeah, that's good that you still have it.
He still has it. It's a sort of a rugged-looking chest, but although it's way over 100 years old.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we've talked a lot about your family and that. Before we get into mining, I did have one other thing I wanted to ask you. What about your school experiences? Where were they, and what did they involve?
Okay, I went to school. I never went to high school. I didn't have the opportunity to go. We had a large family. We lived back pretty far. I would have had no way of transportation. But I went to a one-room schoolhouse. Good teachers.
Where was it located?
It was located below Kingwood. It was called the King School. And I went there. The first school, now, I better back up a little bit. The first school I went to was at Barronville. Barronville, you know where that is?
Yes, I do.
I went there for possibly until I was 8 years old. And we moved. And then down to Kingwood. And then I started the King School. And went there till I was through the grades, 8th grade. I graduated from the 8th grade, that's all.
Remember any of your teachers?
Oh yes, I remember I had good teachers. I remember Emerson Henry. We had Emerson Furniture Store. He was my teacher. Good man. When you work, you work. When you play, you play. He was that type of a guy. Okay, and I had another teacher, one of the girl teachers. Her name was Elda Lear. Very good teacher. She passed away not too long ago. She came to visit me since we were in Somerset here. I'd have done anything for that teacher. We'd almost fight to carry the coal in. We'd see that bucket get empty and both kids would run and grab it. But then we had another one, was Eva Wilson, our teacher. And then I had Alvin Trimpe. Did you know Alvin?
Yes, I did.
He was my teacher. And let's see, I guess those were the teachers that taught there. Some of them taught several years.
Okay.
But those were the teachers I had. They were good teachers.
Well, I can see we're probably going to have to come back and talk to you sometime about school and what school was like and that type of thing, but we better get into coal mining here, because
Okay.
that's what we really came here for today, but we may come back to the school situation later. Well, how about telling me about your coal mining experiences, maybe how you got started, just anything that you want to tell us about coal mining and your experiences.
We'll start out with the first place that I worked in the mines. My father's farm, we had a little coal mines, little house coal mines. So I went in with him. He took me in. I was around, I'd say around 14. And my other brothers, we all worked in this mines. We dug our own coal. We sold coal. We brought this coal out of the mines of the entrance. And there we had a long chute that went down over the hill. It was like in the hillside. This went down over the hill. It was a wooden chute like. And we dumped this coal in the chute. And it would go to the bottom of the chute, to the ground, and where people would come, or we would, load this coal up on sleds, wagons. In the winter, it was the sleds. Of course, we didn't dig too much in the summer because we didn't need too much. But the people would come. We sold this coal to people for their sugar camps. They would come there. And they paid 2 cents a bushel for this coal. So you can see how much money we made. Things was tough. We made, well, if we loaded 100 or 4 ton, would be 100 bushel. That would be $2. That's what you would make. But I have a recollection of one day I went in there by myself. I might have been 16 then. I went in there by myself. We had a little wooden car that we hauled this out on. It held between 10 and 12 bushels, small car. And we had the old wooden track, wooden rails in there. No steel track. We couldn't afford it. But we had these wooden track, and whenever we didn't keep, we had thin, like boards underneath it, and nailed to these boards. And sometimes they would break. The track would go down, and then we were in trouble. But this happened quite often. But anyhow, as I was going to say, as I went in with my dad, and I watched him. He taught me. And I watched him how he mined coal. You take the shovel, turn it upside down, and lay your shoulder on it to keep out of the wet. Sometimes you'd have water to keep out of that. You pick mine underneath the seam of coal. Pick mine back the length of your pick. It would be maybe 30, 32 inches. Then we'd take the auger and we'd bore little holes. We'd use black powder, pop it down, and we'd load it on the cars and take it out. But one day I went in, my dad didn't know nothing about it. I wanted to bring this in. I went in there by myself. Oh, I think my boy went in there scared me to death. But I went in there, I loaded, I believe it was 9 of them cars by myself, pushed them out. And that was 90 bushel. That was almost 4 tons. There's 25 bushel in a ton. So I was proud of myself to do that. I went home and I felt good. But if my dad would have knew it, he wouldn't have stood for that. But anyhow, I really, maybe you might say, disobeyed. But anyhow, that was the first mines that I worked in. Is there anything you want to ask me about that small mine?
I don't think that was right on the farm.
Right on the farm, yes.
The chute that you mentioned, about how long would that chute have been? Do you have any idea?
Oh, yes, that chute, I would say, would have been 30 feet long, maybe 40, down over the hill. And we'd dump that oil, it'd come right down out to the ground there.
Uh-huh. How did this mine, was this mine started by your family, or had someone started digging here earlier? Don't you know that?
I believe that my father opened this mines up, and the coal was only 28 inches high, and we had to crawl on our hands and knees. And when we went in there with that car, I'll tell you, it was low, and it was rough, but we had to do it. That's the way everybody did back in those days. There was little mines sticking around on quite a few farms back in those days, quite a few of them. But like I say, we was just glad to sell a little coal for 2 cents a bushel.
No, it was interesting too that you were selling some of this coal was going to the sugar camps.
Sugar camps,
during
right.
their season to fire their boilers or whatever they had then. To bring the coal out, did you just push the cars out? Did I understand you say that, or did you have some other way of getting the cars out?
No, we just pushed them out.
So you had a grade that would...
It would run in the hill pretty much on the level grade.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't push out hard, but they didn't run very well though on a wooden track. They didn't push they would have pushed much easier if we would have had the steel rails, which we didn't have. We couldn't afford it.
Did you make the wooden track?
Yeah, it was made like 2x4s. They were maybe 8-10 feet long or whatever.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Bill, do you have any questions on the mine we had there?
No, I don't think so. I
That's-
remember a lot of the same things, with the small mines that we had in the Bakersville area.
Okay. Okay, well, let's
Then I'll move on to the next
Move
one.
on to the
Okay. The next mine that I worked in was between Castleman and Rockwood. And this was on the Simon Enos farm. He knew I'd done a little bit of mining, and he came to me and he says, "Would you dig me some sugar house coal?" He had a sugar camp too. Sure, I said, I'll dig you some coal out. And I worked for him a while there, not too long. But it was very low and very hard to get out. But he did have the steel rails in his mines. But I worked and dug him all the coal that he needed for his sugar camp for that winter. And that was the extent of that place I worked. From then, we sort of graduated a little bit. We moved to Rockwood. This was stepped up a little bit. My dad and I, we went in, this was number 10. So we went in, it was a mine, at one time it was a big mine, but we were just pulling the pillars out, pulling stumps, cleaning everything, bringing them back, and caving it in. So he and I worked together, my dad and I, and we lived in a little old shanty down along the western Maryland below Rockwood. There were some old shanties down, little old houses, shanties I called them. But there we lived there in the wintertime. It was awful cold in there, and we walked to work. The mine was right above on the hill where we went in. But I know he only worked there one winter, but I worked there till 1939. And there's where I faced the first tragedy, an accident. Oh, thank the Lord, he was with me. I know he was, because we had an old Model T Ford rigged up that we hauled the coal out with. See, we moved up. But anyhow, the owner of the man that I was working for was D.B. Mulholland, Dan Mulholland. He passed away a long time ago. But he said to me, he said, "Would you help me haul the coal out? And then you can load coal in between." There was 3-4 people worked there, that's all. Yes, I said, I'll do that. These were larger cars. These were ton cars. You could get a ton of coal on them. And anyhow, there was a place we had a cave in, right close to the entrance of the mines. And what we did, we cut a runaround this cave to get in back. We cut a runaround. Okay, it was just wide enough for the cars to get through.
Some places it went through, they would scrape the rib of the coal. So we was going up around there. It was uphill one day. He had probably 5, 6 cars hooked on. He stalled it. He was an elderly man, probably. Well, he wasn't old, but still he was in his 60s. I shouldn't say an elderly man. I'm 80. But anyhow, he stalled this thing. He had arthritis so bad he could hardly walk, but he's run that old motor. So he said, hey, he says, will you come and crank the motor for me? I said, I crawled on the cars, one and another until I got up to the motor. So he turned, I guess he turned the key on or whatever, and I got the crank. It was one of them, you twisted the crank, and I twisted it and it took off. And he took right over me. I couldn't go nowhere. I tried to jump to the side. I jumped to the side the best I could, and he caught me in my clothes, and he dragged me back underneath the cars. There were several of them run over me. The last one was right on me, and the wheel, the motor just stalled again. The wheel was right next to my head. If it had went any farther, that is the reason why I say, I thank the Lord he was with me. I don't know whether you believe in guarding angels, but I do. I believe there was an angel right there with me, and God had something for me to do. So I didn't think too much about this, though. My mother was praying all the time. She says that could be a warning for you. She didn't say it was. She said it could be. Okay, that put me to thinking a little bit. But anyhow, that was about possibly, that must have been around 1938, 37 or 38. Well, it wasn't long. I was back in the mines again. It tore my foot out of place. Tore great big holes in my knee. Kneecap was almost torn off. And quite a few other bumps and bruises, you might know. The cars running over me. But anyhow, he got me out of there. He got me out. He come back. He crawled back over the top of the cars. And he says, are you under the car? I said, well, yeah, you run over me, I said. Oh, I lifted up, we crawl out of there, he said. He got a hold of the car, and he raised it up. I couldn't get out. I couldn't move. I said, get the jack out and jack the car up. I told him how to do it. So he got the jack out, and he jacked it up. In fact, he had to let it back down, man. You know, when he lifted it up, he did lift it, but I couldn't move. But anyhow, he got the jack out, like I told him. He jacked it up and he pulled me out. And you know what? I couldn't see. I was blind for a little while. I stood up, and I walked out. He led me. He took a hold of me. I couldn't see. But that is what I say. When I think of all these things that happened, it had to be the Lord there. It had to be. But he took me out, and he says to me, which doctor do you want to go to? Well, I says, I don't know. He says, you know compensation. You know compensation. You have to pay your own doctor bill. Well, I says, take me to your doctor. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, if you go to my doctor, I'll pay half of the bill, and you pay half. Fine, I said. So we got in he had an old car, an old Durant, is what it was. And we come down off of that hill there, and he almost didn't make the curve. I thought he was going to kill me before he got me to the doctor, up to Doc White. So what he did, he went in there and he set my foot. And my foot was tore completely out. It was setting crosswise. So he put it back, and they just taped it. The doctors wrapped it with tape and gauze. That night I had to take it off and shut the circulation off. But anyhow, it wasn't long. I was back to work. I don't know, a couple weeks, not over, 2 weeks. Back working in the mines there again. Well, I stayed there till 1939, and right before the war, Second World War started. Germany was bombing England, I think, in 39. They were doing some bombing over there. But anyhow, Consolidated Coal Company, that's Acosta. My brother was working there, and some friends I knew. And they said they believed they could get me on if I come over. Because the Consolidated Coal Company got an order, an overseas order. And I went over and I asked them, and said, yeah, we'll hire you. So they hired me. I got a job there. And a couple of us guys, and there was That was the first mechanized mines I ever worked in. That was a single unit. We had single unit conveyors there. It wasn't the old time way like some of the others that I will be talking about. But anyhow, this was a single units. We had a cutting machine, and we had our conveyor that we loaded our coal on. But anyhow, I was there. That was in '39. Well, they put me in a bad place. After we drove our butt heading up and was ready for rooms, they mistreated me. I felt that they did. Because they put me down, I was young, and I was afraid to speak for myself. But anyhow, the boss put me in the main heading to run a conveyor in the water hole. The water running all over me. We had the pumps going 24 hours a day. And I should have had working in that 15 butt heading is what. And he put me down in the main, 8 rides, that's what it was. We had all these drove up ready to make some money. Took me out and put me in there. And put another man in my place, in the rooms where I could have made something. So I just wasn't too happy about this. So he came around, the boss came around. He said to me how I liked it. I don't like it. I don't like this water in here. I says, are you going to keep me in here? Scott Snyder was the boss, the day shift boss. George Gaswhite was the night shift boss. Boy, he says, I have nobody else to run this conveyor, he said. Well, I said, you just better get somebody. This is my last day. So, on the man trip, we had to ride several miles in there. We was in maybe 4 miles. They said it was, I don't know, they said between 4 and 5 miles. So, I was on the man trip, and I'll never forget. The boss came up along the cars with his light shining, looking where I was. He said, you better be out tomorrow, he said. I said, I'll be out looking another job. That's what I told him. I said, you won't see me out here. So I went out, and I went over to Melcroft, the second. This was another place I went. That was another move I made. I went over there. Jack Wilders was the superintendent. And I don't recall who was the mine foreman, but anyhow, I asked him about if he was hiring. Times was hard then. You couldn't hardly buy a job. He said, no, he said, we're not hiring nobody. This was a different mines, like different type of work it would have been. It was a double units. They had the double unit conveyors instead of the singles. And it was operated a little bit different from what the single ones were there at Acosta. He says, no, he says, we're not hiring. He said, we have too many men now. Well, I thought, well, he's not going to hire me. We kept talking. And he says to me, he looked at me and he says, did you ever work on conveyors? I said, yes, I did. And I told him the whole story. I said, I quit on one yesterday. Well, he said, where did you work at? He said to me. I said, I worked Consolidated Coal Company. They were very strict. And he says, if you work for them that long, you can work for me. He hired me. I lost 1 day's work between changing jobs, that's all. But this was quite different. They didn't drive the butt headings and run the cars in the butt headings. What they did, they run a big conveyor up to the end of where they broke the rooms off. And there they had the double unit conveyors. They were called sub-conveyors. We had about 16 to 18 men, half and half on each side. We were at the back end of the butt headings where the big conveyor come up, and the one side would dump in, and the other side would dump into the main conveyor. This main conveyor would take all that coal as it was coming down onto the main heading where they were back with a string of cars. And there the boom man, he loaded the cars where there was a big motor waiting to take them out. And that is the way they did. They transported it out onto the tipple and into the railroad cars. Okay, I was there for a while, not too long. I got a job closer home. I didn't need to drive, only just a short distance. This was another house coal mines. I demoted myself. But anyhow, this man's name was Jake Yunkin. His name was Jake Yunkin. So this was a house coal mine. I worked in there a while. Then there was another, not too long, there was another little small mines there, another house coal mines. And he came to me and he offered me a pretty good deal, I thought. So I said, well, okay. I talked to this guy and I gave him notice and everything. I says, I'll work for you. He was a little bigger coal mines, but it still was a house coal mines. So I went in there and worked for him for a while, and then there was another one on below, another mine. It was called Number 11. This mine was. I'd worked in 10 before, but this was Number 11. It was on the same hillside. So I went to work for him, and there's where I made a mistake. There's where a tragedy took place. I was young. Paul, my son out here, was past 2 years old. And I went in there one day, and I was working in the place, pulling stumps. Very dangerous it was. And I was inexperienced. I will say that. I didn't have too many years' experience as a coal miner then. But I told the foreman when he came in, I said, we ought to have some crossbars overhead. I knew that. I realized this. But anyhow, I was working in there, and I had another man, a man that was working right above me in a room. His name was Orville Heimdahl. But anyhow, I saw the water trickling out of the roof. A couple little trickles. By that, I was buried. That's how quick it came in. There was a piece of rock fell on me, 8, 9 feet long at least. And luckily was, here's another time, the guardian angel was there. He was there. He was with me, and I knew him. I wasn't saved, but he watching over me. He knew what he was going to use me someday. But anyhow, there I was, that big piece of rock on me, and I wasn't in doubt. I knew everything. So I heard my buddy that worked above me, he heard the rock fall. He saved my life, my physical life. He saved it. I heard his feet as he came running down the heading. I could hear him hitting on the bottom, you know. It sounded so loud. He said, surely he's not under that rock. He got down, he looked under, he said. He told me this. He looked under, he saw the soles of my shoes. Oh, he grabbed a hold of that rock. He must have been very strong. He didn't lift it, but he took enough pressure off of it that I could breathe and I could talk. And he hollered. There was 3 or 4 other men that came. They got the jack, they got prize. They jacked it and pried it up, and they got me out. Well, what they did then, they put me in an old mining car, laid me in this old mining car, hooked a pony, where there's a pony mines. They hooked the pony to the car, and they took me out, took me into the hospital, which they didn't do anything to me that night. They thought I was dead. They thought I was going to die. The next morning, I was alive. The Lord says, you're not going to die, he said. But anyhow, I was alive. Then they worked on me. So then a couple days, I lay there, and they said, we're going to put a cast on you. They put a big body cast on from my chin down, neck down to my hips. There I lay in the hospital for weeks. Yeah. They took that one off finally. I got skinny and poor, and it got loose. They took that one off, and they put another one on me. Sent me home. I think 5 weeks I was out of there and home. Put this other one on, I could walk around with that on. I was better, you know, I'd walk around. And it was on for 7 months. So I was off work there for a little bit over a year. And compensation was very small to live on. I lived on 8. We lived on, I had the boy and the girl was on the way. But we lived on this, $18 a week is what we got. I have the papers here, if you need to look at them. But that's what we lived on for a little over a year. It was tough, but I had a good wife. And I tell you, she's one of the best. She was a good manager. We'd have never made it.
What were your injuries?
I had a broken back. This side of my chest was smashed over on this side.
So the right-hand side?
The right-hand side, it hit me on the right-hand side of my head and took me down sideways. And my chest was crushed, like pushed in. It was all pushed, busted loose in here. And but anyhow, I come home. But I said to the Lord, please, Lord, let me live. I want to live. I had a lot to live for. I had this beautiful wife. I knew she was God sent. I know she was. And I had this little boy, and I wanted to live so bad. Please, Lord, let me live. And he did so much more than that. He let me live all these years. But anyhow, he did. And finally, I asked the insurance man, I says, let me go to work. Let me try to go to work. And he said, you're not ready to go to work. But I was off, like I said, it was off for over a year. And so I was tinkering around that they didn't know about it. I wasn't supposed to, but I did it. I wanted to get some strength. I wanted to go to work. I coached him and coaxed him. Finally, he says, if you wanted, you could try it. So there was an elderly man, and his name was Joe Sander, was working in the mines of the Black Beauty Coal Company. Now we're coming to the Black Beauty. But anyhow, he says, come in and work with me. Oh, I says, I wouldn't want to work with you. I couldn't do my share of the work. I know it. I said, my back isn't good. It's a lot of rock to shovel. And I says, I couldn't handle that. He said, you come and work with me. And he says, I'll shovel all the rock. He was in his 60s, that man was. He said, I'll take care of you. And I was in my 20s. I guess I was about, when I got hurt, I was 23 or 4 years old, 24 years old. But then that was a year later. Well, I thought, well, I'll try. So they hired me, and I went to work. And that old man, if you want to call him an old man, he was a good man. He did more than he said he would. He took care of me. He helped me. He shoveled all the rock. All I did, he said, all you need to do is bore holes and help shoot the coal down, and he says, and load it, and I'll work the rock, which he did. And this went on for a while, and maybe a year. It was just turning around the other way. I could do more than he did. I just got, the Lord he just healed me and made me strong, and boy, I'll tell you, I don't have words to express my feeling toward the Lord, what he did for me. But anyhow, I was there almost 10 years. And I don't know, maybe I should say this. It's so much to say about him. He had to quit. He got sick. I'd like to just put this in if we have the time. But he got sick and had to go to the hospital. He had an operation. And he come back. And I knew the pension was coming into effect, and he wouldn't get it. And he deserved it because he had the time. But he had to be in the mines, you see. But he got out of the hospital. He was in Johnstown. I says, Joe, I said, come to work. I said, there's a pension and a hospital health benefit. You'll have me covered. Oh, my, he says, I can't work, he says. Well, I said, Joe, I said, you took care of me all that time. I said, why not me take care of you? You come in and shovel a little coal, he only need to be in 6 months to get it. Finally, I talked him into it. He came back. He worked with me about 6 months. He could hardly raise his shovel, this guy. So, when he got his time in, he decided to hang it up. And then he got cancer. This man did. And he had to be in the hospital. He needed a lot of hospitalization and medical treatments. So he finally died. But I felt this way about this man. He took such good care of me. Why not take care of him? And he thanked me time and time again for doing this. Well, he didn't need to thank me because he deserved it. But anyhow, I was there to that mines until 1953 or 54, I don't know which it was, and the mine closed, the Newlands. It closed due to some labor trouble. It was union problems. It wasn't the company's fault. It was the men's fault. But anyhow, I left there and went over to Harrison. They hired me right away. He said, send all them good guys over there. That's the way they said it. We'll hire them all. So I was there at the Berkey, called the Berkey Mines. We was there and worked there. Art Flickinger was the foreman, and it was machine coal. It wasn't a mechanized mine, but we loaded it. Had a cutting machine we had. Cut the coal, shot it down, and loaded it. Motor pulled them out. But anyhow, I don't know what happened, whether they lost their orders or what it was. Coal was sort of slack, and it didn't happen, but they closed the mines. We wasn't there too long, and they closed it. Well, I was out of a job again. But you know what? I was never out of a job, really. I heard about over at Shanksville. I went to Shanksville at the A&A Coal Company. Small outfit it was. And what they were doing, there was pulling stumps again. Well, I worked for him, I believe it was 5-6 years there. We got the mines finished up. We pulled all the heading pillars, took the track, everything out. Well, there was out of job again. Well, there was another mines over there. And I went to this man, his name was Everett Snyder, from down at Markleton. He had a small mines there. I don't know if you know Everett Snyder or not. A very, very nice man. One of the nicest guys you could ever work for. Always a whistling, happy man. But anyhow, he said, I'll give you a job. So he hired me, and I was working in there, and finally, due to my accident and my chest, an accident I was in, I didn't have enough lung or chest expansion. When that fell on me, it bursted the diaphragm, and it's a hole in there today. They never opened me up and repaired it. But anyhow, due to that, I started going downhill. I got that I couldn't push a car. I got it, I couldn't hardly shovel the coal anymore. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was just I couldn't hardly make it. I didn't want to give up. I was too young to take an early retirement. I wanted to work. But anyhow, I went in for an examination to Johnstown.